In this video, I would like to give you a brief demonstration of how the day-to-day practice of using Git and GitHub in RStudio works. So first, I just want to go over the prerequisites to get to this point. I assume you've installed R&R Studio, you've set up Git and GitHub, you've made a GitHub account, connected it to your local Git software, you've made an R project from a GitHub repository. Um, so if you haven't done all these things, I have videos for all of those. So go back and do that and then come back here. And oh, you can see my cat Silly's in the background. Um, okay, so when I introduced GitHub, I brought up the idea of jargon. It's necessary, it's a little bit annoying, but these are useful terms. So there's a lot to learn. Now you should be familiar with a repository, a collection of files and folders for a project. A local repository is basically a folder that lives on your computer, and a remote repository lives on an online server, but essentially they're the same thing. And a commit is a record of a change to the repository. Okay, so I'm going to introduce two more terms. There are many more that you will need to learn, but you'll learn them as you need to. So one is pull, which, when you're working with a local and a remote together, so, everybody in your team accesses the remote, and then each person has their own individual local version on their computer. So to pull, you merge the changes uh, on the remote to your local. So any new files that have been added, edits that have been made, you are essentially synchronizing your system. So all the commits that have been logged since you last pulled will become part of your local repository. And push means that you merge the changes that you made locally to the remote repository. So the pulling and the pushing is a really crucial practice when you're working with a team, because you don't want to get ahead of each other or make conflicting changes on the same documents. GitHub does have ways of reconciling conflicting changes, but it's a bit of a hassle. So pulling and pushing, those are the two new terms. And I find this a little bit easier to understand in diagram. So it's just a very simple schematic. You're working in your RStudio project, and within that, you open it and then you pull from your GitHub repository to make sure you're up to date with your team. You do some work, you make files, edit files, delete files, you make a commit to your local repository, and then still from within RStudio, you push those changes to the remote and get everybody up to date. So um, yeah, so I'm going to demonstrate how this works within RStudio. So here's my RStudio window. This is actually the GitHub linked project that I made in the previous video. And to I have the GitHub window open in a separate window, just which I'll showing you just for illustration purposes. You don't actually have to have that open. So my and just for illustration purposes, what I'm going to do is make a change. I'm actually going to do it within GitHub, which is good for editing like the README file. Usually this would be a change that maybe somebody else had pushed, but let's just do it from here. Um, this will demonstrate pulling. So I'm just editing the README file. So I'm going to commit those changes. So this is illustrating the commit process within GitHub, which you won't really need to use much, but it's, the same thing. Um, and this has AI things that will fill this in for you, which can be handy. So here's my commit message, some extended description of what I'm doing. So I'm going to commit directly to the main branch. We only have one branch right now, which is fine. Well, I feel like multiple branches is kind of level two GitHub, but for level one, we've got one branch. So I'm going to commit the changes. All right, so now this is what it is. So I'm going to put that. And now I am in my repository here. I'm going to pull. So that's often good practice. The first thing you do when you open your project is press pull. So it says from GitHub, origin main, blah, 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 blah. One file change, two insertions. Okay, close. So now if I look at my README file locally, hey, look at that. The change that I just made in GitHub is now in my local file system. So let's say I make another change locally, and say, this will demonstrate pushing. Okay, so as soon as I save this file, you'll notice that this um, readme.md, hopefully the text isn't too small, this is now popped up under my Git tab in the top right. So if I check this, click on the commit button, so this is actually showing me all the changes that have been made since the previous commit. Um, so I'm actually, um, it's kind of counterintuitive, but basically my local repository was both one step behind and two steps ahead of my remote repository. The remote one doesn't have this gitignore file yet. That's only on my local one, and I haven't committed it yet. Um, so README is behind, so was behind. Now it's ahead. Confusing, right? So we see what's changed, that's fine. Put our commit message, made a commit to demonstrate pushing from a local repository. Okay. There's a few other things here. Um, if you make a commit and if you press commit and you haven't pushed it yet, you can amend it. I'm not going to worry about that. Basically, press commit. Now that commit has gone to my local GitHub repository, but it says here your branch is ahead of origin main by one commit. Okay, so so GitHub doesn't really notice the change until it's been committed. So it's suggesting these things as stage. Anything that's saved and tracked by GitHub, it will make it available to commit. So I've just made the commit for that one file. So I am actually going to make another commit for this gitignore file. And this is just created. So this is actually a file that was created by RStudio when I initiated the project. It automatically populates it with files that the Git software is going to ignore and not try to make you commit. So, okay, I created git ignore. I'm going to commit. I mean, you can make multiple commits before you push. You can also commit multiple files at the same time. It just doesn't have to be just one at a time. But, it's good practice to keep on top of your commits. And of course, now I'm ahead by two commits. So I'm going to hit push, head to main to this repository on GitHub. And now let's see how that looks. So here's my repository. I'm going to go to the code tab, and I'm just opening this to demonstrate that now the two commits that I just made are now on my remote repository. So that's the basic pull push process. Once you get used to it, it's pretty simple. It's just the more often you do it and the more you keep up with it, the easier it is. what can get challenging is if people forget to commit something for a long time and they do a lot of work and it ends up conflicting with what somebody else did. So it's just general GitHub RStudio hygiene. Um, I'm going to demonstrate one more thing while I'm here. So I mentioned that git ignore. Um, I can click here to open it or I can navigate to it. So this lists uh, either specific files or types of files that are not tracked by Git. In this case, RStudio has automatically populated this with a few just kind of accessory files that really have no meaning beyond your local computer. So there's no reason to put them in a repository. There's a lot of other things you might want to put in a git ignore. For example, if you have a folder with data that you don't want to put on your remote repository, maybe if you have a public repository and your data are private, then but you want it all in the same R project, you might add your data folder, for example, to the git ignore file. So let's say I make a new folder that's just for data. Let's see, I think this is how you do it. So if I have this in my git ignore, yeah, so the data thing doesn't show up. I'm going to put just a new file in there to illustrate some data. Um, I don't know, it didn't. I have to rename it. .txt. Got to put the file extension in there. Okay, here is some data. Close that. You might notice in my Git tab, nothing happened because my git ignore is ignoring anything in the data folder. So in order for, uh, if you want the remote repository to work the same, of course, you're going to want to push the changes you made to your git ignore. I'm actually going to add one more thing. Um, so here, our asterisk just means anything. So asterisk dot r proj means just exclude any files that end in dot r proj. So this is just the R project file. Sometimes people want to include this in their remote repository. I just find I generally don't. There are reasons to, but yeah, so now that I've added that, you might notice the R project file disappeared from my commit window. So now I go to my commit thing. So it's showing the changes that were made in the git ignore. So I'm going to put my commit message. If I'm being really lazy, I'll just say updated git ignore. I'll say to exclude data and R proj files or data folder. Okay. So and I will say GitHub is primarily it was really developed for code, but it'll track and push any kind of file you put in there. It'll save data, pictures, documents. Um, it's just a matter of what you want to track. So, okay, I'm going to say commit. That commit is done. Now my branch is ahead by a commit, so I'm going to push. I always just recommend, commit, push, commit, push. Um, okay, why is this still, I'm not sure why this is still staged. Let's see. Did this work? I don't know. Let's see what happens. Okay, for some reason it didn't fully commit. Maybe I didn't have it selected. Okay, so close. And now I'm just going to look on the GitHub repository and refresh this. Okay, there we go. Here's the last commit that I made. Here's like all the commits that I've made. So there we go. That's the general workflow. I hope this was helpful and I hope it can be a useful part of your process.